So, yesterday's banned and restricted announcement may have admittedly been a bit of a train wreck, but we got our answers. In the end, we have no changes to any of the formats, for now, but with an almost certain promise that changes will be coming in early May. Being in the middle of the season, they don't want to make changes, which makes complete sense, but they are almost certainly acknowledging that changes are needed. So today's video will be quick, but not without substance, because it surely forms an interesting debate. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Thanks very much for tuning in today and dealing with kind of the shuffling around the BNR announcement. Or lack thereof, depending on which side of the fence you are on. Now, before we get into the article itself and the meat of today's discussion, just a very quick statement in regards to the article changes, the back and forth, and all that from yesterday. So all I'm going to say is this, then I just want to leave it and move on and focus on the positive and the next steps. Many times in the past, when LSS has taken negative feedback on something or another, one of the primary defenses given to them is, well, they're a small company, which is completely fair. And that is a disadvantage to them in many, many aspects. But one of the advantages of being a smaller company is that it should be easier for everyone within said company to be on the same page. And thus, it's kind of interesting to see what happened yesterday. But again, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things changing. They want to make sure they're doing the right thing by us. So let's put that to bed for the rest of the video and hopefully the rest of the future. So anyway, that's enough of that. So all right, let's go ahead and pull up the article as it is. So again, I'm not going to read word for word. You guys have likely already seen it at this point, but I do want to hit on some of the big stuff, right? So they acknowledge that Bravo's doing his thing. I mean, it's very clear that is where it is. Now they speak a little bit about the Living Legend thing. That was obviously a thing that kind of went back and forth on, and basically what it boils down to is it's their intent for the current season to play out, which the current competitive season to play out, which is fine and makes sense, right? Makes sense to me. To not change it mid-season seems completely fine, right? So the advantage to that is it's both, right? It's advantage, disadvantage. The fallout of that is that people who are suffering at their locals, because we talk about the trickle-down effect all the time, people who are suffering at their locals will have to continue to suffer, but they as a company, they have to do their best to manage the competitive because that's what causes the trickle down. So fine, that's the decision that they've made. I personally think it's probably the right thing to do, but I can certainly, again, we've talked about it before. I think it's probably the right thing to do, but I understand why people would necessarily feel pain from that. So no changes to CC at this time. Now this next paragraph is interesting, right? Also go ahead and highlight it here. The next BNR announcement is scheduled for May 2nd, at which point it's possible that Bravo will have, star of the show, will have LL'd out. It's also possible that he will not, and that he is part of the metagame heading into the Pro Tour. Based on the results of the upcoming competitive events and considering more than just the LL status of Bravo, we'll make changes to the banned and restricted list at that time, if deemed necessary. Now, sure, they cover their butts. So I think this is the biggest paragraph in this, right? And this is why I want to talk about it. It's what I talk about, right? So yes, they give themselves, the parachute cord there with if deemed necessary, right? Which is smart. That said, the way I read this is that I read this as they're saying, yeah, probably we need to make some changes. So that's what I'm taking from this article by and large is we don't want to make the changes. We think some changes need made. We're not going to make them now. And then we're kind of hoping that maybe it fixes itself a little bit with Bravo LLing out. And then, you can make whatever argument you want to make about the events that were scheduled or not or whatever. But I think that's really the takeaway here is we're not going to make the changes now, but we think changes need made. Okay, so that's interesting, right? Because again, I agree. I think you want to, because how do you gauge without seeing how the competitive season, I mean, to a certain extent, without seeing how the competitive season evolves, right? Does somebody have something that can evolve and take out Starvo? Maybe, and if you cut it off, then you don't see how that evolves. On the other hand, you can kind of take that as just kind of hoping and wishing and praying that somebody fixes the problem or the problem fixes itself, right? So again, that's why I think that there's definitely two very valid sides of the coin on this. That said, in many cases, in almost all cases where there's no right answer, no clear answer forward, it's generally better to take no action, I think. But again, like I said, there's impacts from that. So the other thing that's really interesting here is the timing, because yes, there's this ripcord of there if deemed necessary. I get it, right? If deemed necessary. That said, I still think they're basically implying that it's going to come. Now, how significant that will need to be at the time will probably depend on Bravo, right, and what happens to him. But the other interesting thing about this is that it's only a couple weeks, right? So it's a May 2nd, I believe, isn't that what it says? Yeah, so the next one is May 2nd. Well, the Pro Tour that comes up, right? So they basically say, that's what my interpretation is, they're basically saying they want the Pro Tour to be on its own meta. That's less than 2 weeks, right? Pro Tour is 13th to 15th in New Jersey. That's less than 2 weeks, which is not a lot of time. Now, the people going, and fine, you can, they're the cream of the crop, right? So they can handle it. But it's interesting. So to that end, it actually wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't completely shock me if that May 2nd date is not the target date for an announcement, but it is instead the target date for an implementation, right? So, and it'll probably only be a couple days early, but if there is, right? But it wouldn't shock me if we do later this month hear what those changes are going to be, giving people more time to get into that, right? So it's possible, right? Because if you look at you see it there, you have the battle hardened in Pittsburgh would really be, if they did it the last week of April, giving everybody 3 weeks instead of 2, the only one that would be in the quote unquote no one cares meta, right? Because people have already mentally, if they make the announcement, people would have already mentally moved on. But everyone who was going to Pittsburgh would be playing under the old, so that would really be the only one impacted. So, right, because you see 23rd, 24th, there's 3 happening there, and then you have Pittsburgh would really be the only one impacted, and it's just a battle hardened. So, and then everything that comes along with that weekend, sure, right? But I mean, again, I don't know, but 2 weeks doesn't seem like enough to me, so it wouldn't surprise me if May 2nd ends up just being like the implementation date. So either way, folks, like I said, not too much to talk about. Oh, and then obviously there's no changes to Blitz. Then we'll reconvene on May 2nd. So anyway, that's really it for tonight. But it's interesting, right? That again, and I may be interpreting it different than how they mean it. That's what I see when I read it. Not just when I read it last night, but that's what I see when I am reading it now and going over it, is that, yeah, we think something needs made, but we don't want to do it now. And the fallout to that of, let's be honest, the fallout of that to your filthy scrubs, your filthy casuals, is probably more significant than the fallout to your competitive players, right? But this is a competitive game, at least as published, and it is what it is. So anyway, folks, it is what it is, and I hope you'll be able to maximize your success and your enjoyment in whatever fashion. And you know what? If it's only a couple weeks, right? It's only the month of April, and it's getting into springtime, and it's sunny outside. And if you want to, dial back your own competitive and go outside and play, then do that too, right? But do what makes you happy, and right, it'll all be good in the end. So anyway, folks, I will see you tomorrow for a happier discussion, different discussion, non-meta discussion, and nothing else, folks. Go Commando.